So, chapter 34, Economics, IGCSE. So today we're going into relationships between objectives and policy. When we talk about objectives and policy, we're talking about government macroeconomic objectives and policies. So what's the relationship between policies and objectives? The relationship is this. Governments have aims. Government wants to achieve certain aims, right? Government wants to have targets. Government has targets they want to achieve. So these targets needs policies. So policies are the instruments used by government to achieve their targets. Do you get the point here? Government wants to ensure that employment is increasing in our economy. Government wants to ensure that there's reduction in unemployment rates. So for government to be able to do this, government needs policy to be able to achieve low unemployment rates. So the instrument that government would use is called policy. Do you get the point there? Okay. So let's go down, please. Okay. So we go to page 270, 275, 276, I think. 275, thank you. The impact of policy measures on macroeconomic objectives. Let's say government use policy instruments to achieve their macroeconomic objectives. The policies used will depend on the economic circumstances at that time. So government will not just, we can't use constant economic objectives. So whatever we have to use, whatever policies we have to use will be decided by the situation that the economy finds itself at that particular point in time. So ideally, a government will want to promote economic growth, keep inflation and unemployment down. These are macroeconomic objectives. Prevent a large deficit on the current account, which is also another macroeconomic objective, and protect the environment. So the use of fiscal policy, monetary policy, and supply side measures will have an impact on economic variables, such as inflation and economic growth. However, because there are both positive and negative effects of using different policies, it is often difficult for the government to achieve its macroeconomic objectives. For example, the use of contractional fiscal policy to reduce inflation in the economy may increase unemployment. If the government cuts expenditure on social care, for example, fewer social workers will be required. This suggests that governments may have to accept trade-offs between macroeconomic objectives. For example, a government may have to tolerate high levels of inflation if it wants lower levels of unemployment. So the point is this: government will come up with different macroeconomic objectives. Like government wants to ensure that the economy is growing in terms of economic. Government wants economic growth. Government wants stability in terms of prices, which is stability in inflation. Government doesn't want increase in inflation. Government wants unemployment to fall. So all these things are government objectives. But ways in which government is going to carry out these things might make government to also fail, might lead to government failure. I want to talk about government failure means that government intervention, instead of it leading to social benefit, is leading to social cost. That means the cost of government intervention is more than the benefit of government intervention. That is government failure. So these things could happen if government is taking decisions about, okay, for example, unemployment. Government wants to reduce unemployment in the economy. In the course of doing this, government might subsidize for firms. So if government subsidizes for firms, cost of production would reduce. So if cost of production reduces, firms will be able to increase their output. As a result of that, they would need to employ more workers. Unemployment would fall. Yes or no? Because a lot of people would have jobs. But what is the result of everybody having jobs? It will increase aggregate demand in the economy. So government intervention to reduce unemployment has led to increase in aggregate demand, leading to inflation. Do you get the point? That's why we have the Philip curve, who talks about the relationship between unemployment and inflation. That is A level anyway. So there's inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation rate. So if unemployment is falling, inflation would rise. And if you want to correct inflation, you might correct inflation through unemployment. Do you get the point here? So one government policy might lead to government failure. That is the point. Is it clear? So that's the impact of policies in economic measurement. So now we go to unemployment and inflation. The first point here, they said inflation, particularly if it gets out of control, can be very harmful for an economy. Consequently, most governments are likely to take action to reduce inflationary pressures in the economy as soon as inflation threatens to become a problem. Government often favor the use of monetary policy to reduce inflation. What is monetary policy? The use of interest rate or money supply to correct the economy. So one reason for this is because a government can quickly raise interest rates to reduce demand. In many countries, central banks will automatically raise interest rates if they have been given an inflationary target to meet. When interest rates are high, there will be a decrease in aggregate demand. This will help to reduce inflation, but there may be some serious negative effects, such as the following one. So before we go into the effects of using interest rates to correct the economy, if there is high inflation rate in the economy, government wants to use monetary policy to correct high inflation rates, because high inflation rate is as a result of increase in aggregate demand. Yes or no? So government feel that if through the central bank, it increases the interest rate, that means the price of borrowing from banks, a lot of people would have the motivation to save money rather than spending, to enjoy that high interest rate, to benefit from the interest rate. Do you understand? As a result of savings, as a result of high savings, or as a result of increase in savings for households, demand for goods and services would fall. Therefore, businesses would not have any other choice than reduce the prices of their goods, which means demand pool inflation would reduce. Do you get the point here? But what are the negative consequences of using interest rates to correct inflation? Number one, high interest rates will discourage consumers and businesses from borrowing. As a result, there will be a fall in consumption and investment. This will reduce aggregate demand and lower economic growth. Unemployment is likely to rise. Look at it, how it works. Government has increased the interest rate to reduce inflation. Yes or no? So reducing inflation here would be as a result of reduction in consumption. Are you with me, please? Reduction in consumption will bring about what? Reduction in the revenue for businesses. So businesses will not be making enough revenue as they used to make. Therefore, they would want to reduce their costs too. One of their costs is the direct cost, which is labor cost. So firms might want to lay off workers so as to be able to reduce their cost. So high interest rate reduces inflation, but it's leading to an increase in unemployment. That is the first point. Is it clear? The second point, high interest rates will result in higher mortgage payments for many households. This will reduce their spending power and lead to a fall in aggregate demand. Firms will react by reducing capacity and laying off staff. So those that have to pay mortgages, mortgage that you have to pay for buying a house with credit. So an increase in interest rate will automatically increase the rate of interest for mortgages. So that means households will have to pay more on their mortgage payments monthly. This will reduce their purchasing power. And as soon as their purchasing power reduces, they won't be able to buy as they used to buy. So firms will not be making revenue and profit. They would also want to lay off workers. What? Yeah, they decrease prices and lay off staff, which is not good. Lay off staff, which is not good again. So the third point, firms will incur higher interest rate charges. This will raise their costs and reduce their profit. They may invest less, which will reduce aggregate demand. So for firms that also have borrowed money from the banks, they will have to pay high interest rates. It increases their expenditures, yes or no? So because their expenditures is increasing, their net profit would fall. So as a result of that, they are going to incur more cost. Do you get it? They're going to incur more cost. which means they won't be investing as they used to invest. They might want to reduce workers too. And the last point here, they said higher interest rates will discourage firms from borrowing to invest in new technology and expansion. This will hamper their long-term development. They may lose their competitive edge in foreign markets. So another point here is this: if interest rate is increasing, firms that need to borrow to improve or to get the latest technology or equipment would not be able to do that. As a result, would hinder their expansion. So if they are unable to expand, they won't be able to enjoy economies of scale. And if they are unable to enjoy economies of scale, their cost of production would rise, meaning their profit will fall and they won't be able to compete with foreign competitors. Is that clear? The next point, if higher interest rates result in higher exchange rates, it will be harder for firms to sell abroad. Exporters are likely to react by laying off staff. So if higher interest rate leads to high export exchange rates, then prices of export becomes higher. Businesses that sell to customers, foreign customers, will not be able to sell as they used to sell. They might also have to reduce the number of workers they have. Do you get the point there? Do you get the point? Afternoon. Do you get the point, please? So the next, they said, even if government favors, stop dragging, please. Stop dragging. So they said, even if a government favors the use of fiscal policy to reduce inflation, there will still be some negative effects. So now government is thinking about so here they said, even if a government favors the use of fiscal policy to reduce inflation, there will still be some negative effects. One, like higher taxes and lower government spending will result in unemployment. So if government is using fiscal policy, which means the use of taxation or subsidy, where is it? Yeah, I want to see it in my site here. Thank you. So use of fiscal policy, we talked about the use of taxation and subsidy to correct inflation. If government is using fiscal policy, we said if the government favors to use fiscal policy to reduce inflation, what happens? Like taxes. Higher taxes and lower government spending could result in unemployment. If taxes increases, households will pay more taxes. So their purchasing power would fall. When their purchasing power falls, what happens? They won't be able to buy as they used to buy. Then firms that are expecting customers to buy would have less revenue. Yes or no?
Yes.
So this makes it what? This makes them not to sell as they used to sell. They might have to lay off workers, unemployment. Lower government subsidies or lower government spending like subsidies. If government reduces subsidy to be able to correct inflation, high inflation rates. Subsidy means like financial help from government. This is supposed to reduce firms' cost of production. But if government reduces subsidy, it means the cost of production for firms would rise. Yes or no? As soon as they try it, what happens? They won't be able, prices will rise. Or they have to reduce other costs like the direct cost for labor. Then they have to lay off workers. Unemployment again. I think the first point is clear. The second point is that people may suffer as a result of poorer government services after the cuts in expenditure. For example, waiting times for NHS treatments may rise. So the point is that they said if government reduces expenditure spending on government parastatals, it means that the services from these government parastatals would reduce.
Yeah.
So that means they're going to increase the waiting time for customers or consumers, which is not good for customers too. Do you get it? So the repercussion, the consequence of reducing using policy to correct inflation has a positive and negative implication. That is the point. Any question about that?
No.
So we go to possible trade-offs. It is clear from above that both anti-inflationary fiscal policy and anti-inflationary monetary policy can have some unwelcome effects on the economy. In the past, when governments have tried to reduce inflation, unemployment rises because there's always an inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation. Do you get the point? So this suggests that trade-off exists between inflation and unemployment. So if government is trying to reduce inflation rate, unemployment rate might rise. If government is trying to increase, the only way out for inflation, there's no way out between inflation and unemployment. If unemployment has to reduce, inflation would rise. Yeah. And for you to correct inflation, you might have to increase unemployment too. You get the point? They have to balance between both. It's difficult to balance between both of them. It's always difficult. So that is the point they're making. So, however, the use of supply side policy measures to reduce inflation may avoid rising unemployment. You see? So government should try other government policies, like supply side policy, to correct inflation. So here they said, this is because they are designed to increase the supply of output rather than increase aggregate demand. Here, using supply side policy would only increase output for firms. Do you get the point? Yeah. So because it's going to increase output for firms, it does not disturb aggregate demand. Do you get the point we're making here? Using supply side policy would only improve output. It does not affect aggregate demand. Do you get it? So that's why it might be easier to use supply side policy. Whatever happens, reducing aggregate demand in the economy would lead to unemployment. That is the point about inflation. So using supply side policy, because supply side policy will bring about increasing output. It means it's not going to affect the revenue businesses would make. Do you get the point? Yeah. So that's why they might not need to reduce the number of workers they have. So unfortunately, supply side measures are often very slow to have an impact on the economy. Consequently, governments are more likely to use them together with other measures to reduce inflation rather than a sole measure. The problem about supply side policy, for example, education and training. The benefit of education doesn't come in a very short period of time. It takes a bit of time before it comes, yes or no? Yeah. But there's nothing government wants to do than to use education and training to increase output. Do you get the point we're making here? Mm-hmm. So using supply side policy do not give quicker results. But there's no other choice than governments to use it instead of using a sole method, like to reduce aggregate demand. So government should try other measures to use instead of thinking about reducing the aggregate demand in the economy. Because when you reduce aggregate demand in the economy, the problem falls back to consumers. Consumers become vulnerable, which is not good for consumers and good for the business. I think it's clear. Yeah. So go to the next point. Economic growth and inflation. It said policies to promote growth. Governments around the world will be keen to see the economic growth when they are elected. This is because economic growth usually means that living standards will improve, and therefore the voters will be satisfied. To promote economic growth, the government can use expansionary fiscal policy. I'm going to stop there first. So, policies to promote growth. Every government wants the economy to grow. Because if the economy is growing, it means the trust you have placed on them is yielding a positive return. Yes or no? Yeah. Good. So, what happens with this? Government could use what they call expansionary fiscal policy. There's fiscal policy, which is the use of taxation and subsidy to correct or to control the economy. What is expansionary fiscal policy? Expansionary fiscal policy would mean that government is reducing taxation or increasing spending. Do we get expansionary? Yeah. Expansionary fiscal policy could be reduction in taxes, cut in taxes, or increasing spending on subsidy. So this would involve lowering taxes, which I just explained, or increasing government expenditure. If taxes on households are lowered, people will have more disposable income. If they spend this extra money, aggregate demand will rise, and businesses will be encouraged to produce more. If businesses raise output levels, the economy will grow. Similarly, if the government spends more by employing more teachers, social workers, and health workers, for example, extra demand in the economy will be created. Again, firms should respond to this by producing more, and national income will grow. So, using the expansionary fiscal policy will help the economy to grow. Either way, if government is spending on employment, aggregate income in the economy, the income level in the economy would rise. Because in as much as you have a job, your your income level would increase than what it used to be. Maybe before now, I have $100. Now I have a job, so I'm having additional. So that means what I can spend these days will be more than what I used to spend. So either which way, I'll be able to spend more. Firms would also respond to that by increasing their output. The economy will grow. That is the point about economic growth and promoting growth here through policy. Policy means instruments that government would use to achieve their objectives. That is what policy is about. So government will use expansionary fiscal policy by lowering taxation or increasing spending to increase aggregate supply, yes, which is output in the economy. You get the point, please?
Yeah.
Great. We'll go down to page 277. So what is the possible trade-off when government wants to increase economic growth? Here they said, one of the dangers of policy designed to increase economic growth is that they may be too expansionary. As a result, the economy might become overheated. This means the firms will not be able to meet the rising aggregate demand and respond by raising the prices instead of producing more. If the economy is overheated, look at the consequence now, the trade-off between policies and increasing output. The outputs firms might increase output to the extent that they cannot move above their capacity. So instead of them to try to find a way of increasing their capacity, they would rather increase the price. Inflation again. This is how the trade-off comes in. So firms wouldn't want to increase their output. They want to maximize profit by increasing the price. Because at that point in time, they know customers are vulnerable. They want more of the product. Increasing their capacity might mean they have to increase their cost of production, which they don't want to do. As a result, they increase the price. Do we get the point there? So that's the trade-off between the policy of expansionary fiscal policy and increasing output. The trade-off is that there's going to be inflation through increasing price. Clear, please? Yeah. The third point, economic growth and environmental protection. So there's always a trade-off also. When you want your economy to grow, you have to use natural resources, yes or no? You have to pollute the environment, yes or no? So let's see what they said. They said economic growth is often associated with environmental damage, especially if the growth is very rapid, like that thing in China and India over the last 10-15 years. As businesses produce more output, there are likely to be more emissions from power generators, chemical processors, and other manufacturers. Also, the extra wealth and income that comes along with economic growth means that increasing numbers of people buy cars and other vehicles. This results in more emissions and increasing congestion on road networks around the world. Pollution resulting from rapid business expansion in places like China and other developing nations is especially dangerous to health. For example, according to the government report, more than 80% of China's underground water drawn from wells used by farms, factories, and mostly rural households is not safe to drink due to pollution. So before we go to the next paragraph, the point about growth and the environment is this. Growth is important. Growth means output is increasing. Growth means firms are producing more, are producing further. But the point is this, when firms are increasing their output, they have to use generators, they have to use equipment, they have to use machines. Yes or no? Yes. These machines used will emit carbon, leading to pollution, isn't it?
Yes.
So that is the first point. But other point is this, because firms are increasing their output, household income is increasing. People have more money to buy vehicles, to buy motor cars. Yes or no? Yes. This increases traffic congestion in the road. This brings about more pollution, isn't it? Pollution. So government growth would come up with environmental damage, which is pollution. That is the point then. Is it clear? Yeah. We go on. The possible trade-off. They said in developing countries, it is unlikely that the majority of people would want to prevent economic growth that delivers less poverty, longer life expectancy, lower infant mortality, and improving living standards. So it is just this. The trade-off between economic growth and environmental damages, you reduce the rate of growth in the economy. If you want an increase in life expectancy, if you want low infant mortality rate, If you want low debt rate in the economy, then you have to reduce growth. I think it's clear. So that is the trade. Any question about it?
No.
Shall we move on? Inflation and the current accounts on the balance of payments. Are you there?
Yes.
Are you there?
Yeah.
It said measures to reduce inflation. There's a possible link between inflation and the current accounts on the balance of payments. When inflation is high and persistent, government will try to reduce it because of the harmful effects associated with high levels of inflation. If prices are rising, the price of exports will also be rising. This will reduce the demand for exports, creating pressure on the current account balance. It is also possible that consumers might switch from expensive domestic goods to relatively cheap imports. This would make the current account balance even worse. Consequently, high inflation rates have a damaging effect on the country's current account balance. So let me talk about this before we go to the next paragraph. Governments might, if an economy is having a deficit in the balance, in the current account balance, government might want to reduce it by increasing prices. So why do you have a deficit in your current account balance? That is the point. The reason for having deficit in the current account balance is that the country is doing more of imports than exports. Do you get the point?
Yeah.
So for you as a country to balance things up, to improve your current account balance, you might have to increase export. Increasing export means you have to reduce the prices of export. When you increase the prices of exports become cheaper. Foreign customers will be able to buy. But the amount of money they're going to spend might not be good enough to correct your balance of your current account balance of payment. Your sales volume might rise, the sales volume might increase, but you might not be making profit. Do you get the point?
Yeah.
So government will think of increasing prices again. So when government increases prices, exportation becomes higher, the price of export becomes higher. And if the price of export becomes higher,
this export,
foreign customers will not be able to buy as they used to buy. Domestic prices will also increase. These consumers look in the domestic market will start thinking about buying importation again, buying from cheap importers. Buying from cheap importers would make the current account balance to be also what to go back to deficit. This is how it is cyclical.
yeah.
Exports will bring about reducing the deficit in the balance of payments current account. But you need to make an increase in price or export so that you can balance the current account. To do that, you have to raise the prices of export. Raising the prices of you have to raise the general price. So raising the general price will make prices for domestic products even to be more expensive for domestic customers. They start thinking of buying from cheap or buying from foreign businesses. Buying from other foreign businesses will increase imports in the economy. The current account again will go to what? Deficit. That is the point they are making there.
Yeah.
So if a government uses monetary policy to reduce inflation, the balance of payment situations could actually become worse. This is because monetary policy that uses higher interest rate to reduce inflation might strengthen the exchange rate. So if government try to use monetary policy like interest rates will automatically increase exchange rates.
Yeah.
So if exchange rates increases, prices of exports will rise. It will not improve. It will only make it worse. Do you see? Yeah. So if these things happen, it becomes government failure. Yeah. Do you get the point I'm making here? So what is the possible trade-off? A government trying to reduce inflation by raising interest rates may have to accept that the current account will worsen over the period of time. So that is the point. The government will be able to reduce inflation through monetary policy. But government should note that the balance of current accounts will always be what? Deficit. It will not improve. Is it clear?
Yes.
So we have the questions. Let's do it together, right?
Yeah.
They said low interest rates to promote economic growth might do which of the following? Low interest rates to promote economic growth. Low interest rates to promote economic growth might do which of the following? Will it cause inflation, result in higher level of unemployment, increase the current account deficit?
Inflation, right?
When there's low interest rate,
No.
low inflation, low interest rate,
So,
it will cause inflation.
because of money.
When there's low interest rate, it means purchasing the price of borrowing becomes cheaper. Everybody could borrow.
Then they aggregate demand
Increases, inflation will decrease. So the answer is A. Is it clear, please? Question 2. More environmental protection is likely to be needed if the government follow which course of action? More environmental protection is likely to be needed if the government follow which course of action?
Inflation down. Grow faster, right? Yes, it will grow faster.
To stimulate the economy to grow faster, yeah. The answer is B. We said it already that for environmental damage or for environment, we need to there's a trade-off between environment and economic growth.
Yeah.
Is it clear? Is it clear, please? So that's the end of chapter what?
34.
34.